Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Intentional Product Manager podcast, where we help ambitious product managers position themselves as leaders and fast track their careers. Today I have someone who's not only led across tech giants like Amazon and McKinsey, he's now helping transform supply chain at Starbucks from the inside out, and is a wonderful photographer, Sekhar Putcha. Sekhar, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here, Shobit. And yeah, it's been about 12 years since that photo shoot.
I know, because when you did the photo shoot for us, my daughter was a few months old and now she's 13. So it's about 12 years. Exactly. I love your story because it's not just you've have all these brands on your resume. You have taken bold career steps, non-linear moves, applied product discipline at a bunch of places. So let's get going with some icebreakers. You're based in Seattle and I'm in Boston. What's the one thing your city does better than mine?
That one is easy and no bias from where I work now, but it's got to be coffee. Seattle coffee is definitely, I think, a notch above most places in the US. And of course, now I work for Starbucks, so it's hard to say I'm not biased.
That is a very fair. Boston is not known for coffee. Dunkin' Donuts, it does not produce the best coffee, but it's okay. But I would have thought you said being outdoors. Seattle, I think there's a law. If you don't like the outdoors, you're not allowed to live in Seattle. Okay, so you work at some pretty intense places. What's something you do outside of work that surprises people?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned outdoors, which I try to get out as much as possible. But as you also know, Seattle is not very outdoors friendly year round. So what I do at home, given my sweet tooth, is I make my own gelato. And incidentally, so that we don't, I give Boston enough credit. My inspiration was Toscanini's from Cambridge. So I was a fanboy. I actually asked them for the recipe and how they make. So that's what I do at home. So I make my own gelato every now and then.
Two things. I'm supposed to visit Seattle. This might make the trip come sooner rather than later, right? Your homemade gelato. And second, I think Boston definitely does better ice cream. The local ice cream places are really good.
I'll grant that. Yeah, see, I'm a realist. I mean, coffee versus gelato is definitely, Boston's got it down on the other side.
Big milestone year for both of us. Congrats on your 20th wedding anniversary coming up. If you could give one piece of product advice for marriage, what would it be?
I'll maybe channel a little bit of Bezos here. So he says customers are divinely discontent, right? They always want things faster, always want things cheaper, right? So I think in my marriage, that's what I've experienced. There is no resting on my laurels. The standard keeps going up. So if you think of marriage as the product and my wife as the one and only customer, that's the story. Like the bar doesn't go down. But it's been a great partnership. She's been a big supporter of our career growth, and even the year I was in Boston was not particularly easy. So I think it is a partnership, which probably doesn't get talked about as much when you have two individuals working. There's a lot of sacrifices that are made by both parties.
Okay, cool. Now let's get into unpacking your non-linear career journey. And I love careers that it's not logical. After this, you just go to that. So you went from Amazon to McKinsey to Starbucks. Not the most traditional path, especially moving into consulting mid-career. People often do it right after the MBA or whatnot. So what made you choose McKinsey at that point when you mentioned it wasn't necessarily the highest offer on the table?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, and this I think it was just the time of around 2022 when the market was really hot. COVID had happened. There were a few very black swan type of events that were new. So McKinsey wouldn't have even have been an option, but because work from home was the norm, it did become an option. So it came in as an option that now was on the table. And then I think, you've been there. There's just, I'm a big fan of optimizing for learning as much as possible. I found that that's when I've had the most success looking back. Of course, hindsight is 2020. Luck plays a huge part. But just the surface area of what I picked up at Amazon, which I still feel was the best professional learning phase of my career. But taking some of those principles and seeing how I could apply that from the perch that, as you know, folks at McKinsey have, getting a broad view of by industry, by geography, by segment was hugely useful. And of course, the problem solving toolkit, etc. So for me, when I had to make the choice between McKinsey, which was very left field, and these, I just went back to what should my long term optimization tell me, and that was McKinsey.
Now you make that switch. Like, what's the biggest mindset shift or shift in your mind you had to make that successful?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that in a company like Amazon, you have a very strong operating system, a decision framework that decentralizes and empowers decision making at all levels. And that, as you know, in most industries, especially those that are trying to be more tech forward, it's not a given. And I think that was what you and in McKinsey you have to influence because you're not the company, and building that muscle. Hey, here's what an Amazon would do, or a Google, right? In any of these companies that have changed how tech is deployed and leveraged. If you take that and put it in more traditional companies that are either highly regulated or just come from a very brand forward sort of an uh, operational culture, then you start to see, okay, how do I make a soft landing between taking these principles that worked very well at an Amazon, but what would it take for them to work in a different environment? And I think that's central to when you work for a company like McKinsey, and doing that at scale, at speed, at a high level, when working with leaders who are struggling with bringing about change. I think was a big mindset shift, which I'm using now. It's definitely a big part of my toolkit.
Connecting those two back now, you mentioned you were optimizing for learning, the McKinsey. When you think of like risk and optionality, especially it concerns with careers, and just context, like many product managers struggle with optional anxiety. They don't want to go do something that could give them more options later on, but doesn't seem like the linear path. How do you think about it now?
That's a great question. And I was starting to smile because that was something I struggled with a fair bit. I still don't think I've cracked the code on it, but I'm happy to share sort of my journey. If you look at my journey, even within Amazon, I started in retail. I came out with a supply chain degree. I worked at Manhattan Associates, which is on the supply chain side, right? Where we shared time together. And when I started, I worked in retail. Then got antsy after about 3 years. I moved to AWS, then got antsy again and moved to the consumer side with Alexa, right? So there was this feeling of I do not want to be pigeonholed. I want optionality. I want to continue to learn, which was great, right? But so you could say that part of my career, I definitely optimized optionality. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, when I went to McKinsey, it was again that same freedom that I felt I had compared to some of the other options on the table, where I would be very, very specifically working in, say, logistics, right? And I think what I have learned in McKinsey, and as you know, you are forced to pick a topic that you are known for. Someone's going to want to pick up the phone and want to talk to you because you are the guy for it. So it really made me focus in that environment because it's a huge company, 40,000 employees, but at the same time, it's very decentralized and it operates in very small groups, if you will. And what I learned in those 2 years was, even if I had what I thought were generalized product management skills that I picked up in Amazon, where I was gravitating to was always supply chain and technology. And I got to test that out. So if you talk about that spectrum of where I was, I think optionality early in your career is good. But once you start to want to specialize and grow, and where I am now, I am very firmly convinced that my wheelhouse is supply chain, technology, AI. Like that is where I want to go to my grave in, right? So I think that was the evolution.
It's great to see expansion to uncover and learn new things and then like understanding what you love and then going back towards that. Even at a place like McKinsey, which is like known to be generalist consultants, and from the outside world, it seems like that it would be that way.
And I think one thing I'll add that it definitely came at a cost of linear vertical growth, right? Like there's definitely, and that is a choice each individual has to make for his or herself. Because if you're going to diversify, you are definitely going to slow down if you want a vertical march up the ladder. But then again, I think that's the choice you make. And this is kind of where I am. Maybe another 10 years from now, maybe we'll have a different answer.
Let's talk about operations and product management. You spend a lot of time in operations heavy roles, Amazon last mile delivery, Starbucks, AWS inventory, I believe. When you look at like all the different product areas, this is not the one where people are like, oh, that's like really cool, sexy product area, right? Operations. What's the biggest misconception people have about operations product managers versus like consumer product managers?
Thank you for that question. It's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I wrote a couple of pieces on that as well. I think the biggest misconception with Ops PM is actually that category even exists, right? I think in the popular lore, when you think of the typical archetype of a product manager, you immediately go to, say, a Google or Facebook PM who are designing very consumer-facing features, where the metrics that you're looking at, whether it's engagement, delight, that is what you are attuned to think of. But if you peel that back and look at the toolkit of what a product manager does, whether it's being analytically driven, whether it's being continuously focused on taking this thing, which is a product, and just not letting go and focusing on the outcome, focusing on the customer, it actually translates really well to I would say, enterprise and operations business context. It's just that it's a very different flavor. One, you are not dealing with bits and bytes alone. You are dealing with the physical world. You're dealing with your customers who are not necessarily using your product for delight. They're using it to get work done. So in many ways, your engagement may mean getting out of the way as opposed to getting them to use your product. So there's these fundamental differences that exist between those two archetypes. And I like to call it an Ops PM. I was fortunate enough to sort of start on that journey when I started in Amazon, where up until then, you either had program managers in Ops or you had tech, but there was no one in between. But I think just bringing that voice of the customer, but also understanding, whether it's research, whether it's engineering, and the operational reality, I think positioned me very well. And that's where I find myself very engaged and a lot of passion there.
You mentioned creating that article. I think I saw that, and that's when I reached out to you. I mean, we've known each other for like 20 years probably, but it was then I was like, hey, you're writing about this. You should be on the podcast. So definitely power of writing is important here. Okay, so you talked about also this transition where there used to be program management and tech in supply chain, and then product management came in. So tell me more about bringing product mindset to organizations which were like used to sort of more of a project or program driven delivery.
I think that's a very good follow-up to sort of the Ops PM as slightly different. When you go to the enterprise context, you are tech delivery generally is thought of as these big implementations that last years and months. And your time to impact, your time to value is typically very long cycle. And that is just the result of thinking in projects and not thinking in terms of outcomes. So with my team and in general, when I think about this space, and again, a lot of it picked up from Amazon, is that there are no points for hitting a milestone of doing a launch. Actually, a lot of the hard work happens after the launch. You may actually share this because I contrast our experience at Manhattan Associates, where I was part of the team that would do the implementation, but I would walk away when we were live or a month after we were live. And that's just so the opposite of what you would do, which again at Amazon when I started, that was the thing that is like, oh, I am incentivized to build this right because I am responsible for the life after it goes live. And it's perpetual. That's the other thing. So I think when you think project, you think discrete, you think milestones, you think not persistent. And when you go to product, all of those are sort of inverted. It is persistent. You are caring about it. You're incentivized to keep it running for the lifetime.
Two things. At Google, somebody came up with this and it just stuck, which is focus on landing, not launches. I think it might be not launching, but landing. I think it might be Larry or Sergey or someone way up there, but it really helped. It is like being a business owner. Like, I can't now afford to be like, cool, we have 5 new students join, all the best to them. No, like, they got to succeed. Everything needs to happen. And like, that's being a business owner. And I think that's like product.
Exactly. And there's, you can start to draw parallels to the product is the CEO. Again, I don't, there's a little bit of hubris in that statement, but if you step back and say it's about ownership, it's about shared leadership and looking across the board and seeing where there are gaps and filling them so that ultimately the outcomes and the customer experience matters.
Very good point on that, because I was talking to another person on for this podcast. His name is also Shobit. So I wasn't talking to myself, although I do that often. And he was also talking about like, hey, CEO of the product, it's like overstated. It adds a lot of misconceptions, but like the owner of the outcomes is really important too. Let's spend some time. So I want to talk about generative AI and product in the real world. I've been reading a lot of articles where the rules have changed. You put generative AI, magic happens. I've seen that quite a bit. So let's talk about what's real and what's hype in Gen AI, especially in operations and supply chain.
It's the zeitgeist. It's hard to not talk about it, but it is also true that I'm incredibly passionate about this topic, and also I really think it is here to stay. But as you mentioned, I think the hype in when you talk about generative AI and supply chain is not very different from how it probably gets applied in other domains, which is Gen AI will solve all supply chain problems. And it's just too broad of a stroke to sort of make that statement, right? And I think here's my mental model. The most of when you think of the core supply chain problems that like an Amazon or a UPS or a Walmart solved over the decades, most of them involved optimization. Most of these are numerical problems that are not particularly addressed by LLMs. So that core engine of whether that's last mile, whether that's where to put things in a warehouse, transportation where you've had a lot of experience initially, it's a numbers problem, right? And those have been around for 2-3 decades, whether that's the vehicle routing problem or news vendor problem, etc. I think what is also lost in when you think about supply chains is supply chains almost never go across according to plan. Supply chain, in fact, is about managing variability. And you start with a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're really off. But you start with a plan, but you expect variability and you solve for it. And I think that is where a lot of where there's a lot of opportunity and where generative AI can help, which is there's a lot of high friction workflows. Whether that's reading documents, whether that's parsing delivery photos for extracting information, whether that is compressing tribal knowledge and processes, right? Like it's just scattered in documents. There's a long tail of many things that humans try to plug. Usually they don't succeed. And it's this glue that LLMs can fill, which is, hey, whether that's a customer service call about a delivery problem you're having, or whether that's a workflow where you need to follow an SOP, LLMs can definitely help there. So I think that's where they can help. Essentially, they're complementing traditional ML, for lack of a better word.
I'm going to repeat something you said because it's so important and I mentioned it so many times and people don't get it. So I just want to underscore it. ML doesn't solve all problems. There's many problems where solutions existed way before ML. I just had this example of somebody saying, oh, so now we have ML, so Google Maps can route very efficiently. I'm like, oh no, it routed very efficiently way before it was using ML. Okay, that is exactly what you said. But it's the managing the exceptions and helping people work through those exceptions, variability, which is always happening in supply chain, is where Gen AI is really has that extra potential.
Yeah. And even it's that took about routing, which you talked about, like routing, the problem we have to solve at scale is input quality, which is your streets, your maps, your addresses. And that definitely, like LLMs can come in because you're talking about language, landmarks, address strings, versus if you're talking about like if you get your inputs right, that algorithm's been there for many years.
Let's talk more. So Gen AI gets a lot of productivity gains also for people. Has that changed anything and what has it changed in how you work?
It has fundamentally given me an edge that now if it was taken away, I would have massive withdrawal symptoms. And that's mainly because, as you know, Amazon is a very document heavy culture. So work happens when you write things out. That sharpens your thinking. It helps you discuss and implement things and get things out in the field. And from that perspective, a lot of what I used to struggle with in the past, if you think of where I would spend time, getting getting a document from a seed level to something that was finished involved a lot of grunt work. And as someone who likes to write, but I'm also extremely picky about the words I use, about the sentence structure, or how the flow of the document. And I would spend an inordinate amount of time trying to get that right, especially when you're getting out in front of leaders. And now that part, like going from a seed to say about 80% finished, is in the order of minutes. Like, so you spend a lot of time on the seed, get it to that finished, and then you start to refine a little bit. So I think just that alone is to me, and that I believe is the main toolkit for a product manager. I'm not a believer in tools that are for product managers. I think Word is the tool that you have because most of what you're doing is analyzing and writing out your manifestos, right?
So we talked about AI helping product managers. We talked about AI changing supply chain. When you think of product managers and they're preparing for a AI native future, or so someplace like AI is always available, what should they do to prepare?
One, I think it applies to probably most disciplines, but even more so to product managers, is learn to work alongside or with or above generative AI, whatever that means. You cannot escape it. You will definitely be left behind if you do not adopt and have it be a force multiplier for you. And so and why does that matter in product management specifically? If you think of traditional pre-gen AI product versus engineering sort of spectrum in the software lifecycle, product managers are ideating, and then quickly it starts to get to, okay, let's start to build prototypes, let's start to put it in front of customers, and then start to build, harden the product and get it out for scale. And I think a lot of that activities centered left, I think, could be compressed. I'm seeing that myself, where you can prototype things much faster. Again, this is not production ready. It's not secure. It's not cost effective. It's not low latency. But it is magical to have the ability to build something really quick and put it in front of your users without even having to have a prioritization conversation with your engineers. Not that you don't talk to them, but you are, if you think of product management teams as being leveraged for the engineering teams, you are really, really leveraging that. And I think that's where the future is. There's a bit of a movement of a lot of the design and those fast iteration and testing with customers landing with product managers, and then much more specialized engineering work on hardening the product that eventually gets deployed at scale. So I think that's what I think the future is extremely bright for product managers, because if you understand your domain, if you have that customer empathy, you can do a lot more now and in the next few years than you ever could in the past.
It seems like a lot of the gain for product managers is on the discovery side, like as Marty Kagan calls discovery and delivery. And so you can do a lot more yourself in discovery.
100%, 100%. Just the ability to sort of not have to theorize, which again, like not that there is some, and I think that was before, in the past, it was a superpower which set apart product managers. But now the bar to actually build something and put it out in the field and get that feedback from actual users can sort of bring up so many more product managers who don't have those innate product sense, right? Like that's another word which is a little which is a little nebulous, but I think it brings much more predictability and method to sort of being able to move the needle there.
I feel the most product sense I got was from McKinsey. Not because it was like I was building any products there, but just like very logical reasoning and figuring out what's insightful, what's not. What are your thoughts on like that experience and that bringing product sense?
Great question, Shobit, and it's something that I've thought about. I think in the formative years when I became a product manager, I was in Amazon. So that is fundamentally what has shaped how I think about it, which is fast iteration, don't go for perfection, put it out in the field, take calculated risks, and then iterate and build, which applies a lot in my domain, right, which is in the ops side. McKinsey was a very nice layering on top of that. One, it forces you to be, because of how time bound we were in executing the studies, it forces you to be much more planful than you would be otherwise. It's the constraints. It is the day one hypothesis that was actually very different from what I was used in Amazon, because in Amazon you would start bottoms up. Let me learn about it. Let's start with understanding from bottoms up. In McKinsey, you don't have the time, and you frankly can't do that. You have to start with an answer on day one and then disprove yourself, right, or refine it over the course of the study. So it's almost like a somewhat diametric approaches, and I think I land somewhere in the middle. I'm still figuring it out. But I think the constrained time and speed is what I took away most from my time at McKinsey. Like, you just have to very quickly go through the gears.
I'm going to ask you to translate because many listeners won't know what day one hypothesis means. So what is that?
Day one hypothesis is you need to have an answer for whatever it is that you were trying to solve. So typically, whether it's McKinsey or any other place, when a problem comes to you, one approach is, you start bottoms up, you start with a very clean slate, no bias, and you try to arrive at the answer. And typically, it can take a very long time if you don't have that pattern recognition. In McKinsey, instead, you start with, this is my answer with the information that I know. And there's a lot of investment in gathering as much data as quickly as possible and arriving at that answer. And it's also folks who are pretty experienced coming in with a lot of pattern recognition. So you have an answer which you believe, like, I learn otherwise, this is my answer. And the goal of the next few weeks as you go through that study is to continue to refine it. It could change. In fact, they are very deliberately forcing you to question, to think of why this has to be true. But just starting with with an answer and having to put this in front of clients forces you to really think about it critically, right? And I think I find that very, very unique in many problem spaces, especially when there's a lot of pattern recognition that you can already bring, which at my age, with all my gray hairs, I would like to think I can do that.
I love it. And I hope people are listening because I happened to be at McKinsey before I ever started a product role. So it shaped it dramatically. I tend to get to an answer quickly and then iterate from that and often change my mind. But for now, this is my hypothesis and it really helps in figuring out how do I prove or disprove it. So as we're getting towards the end, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Quick ones. Don't overthink it. A product you secretly admire but would never work on.
TikTok. I had to stop using it and delete the app. It's way too addictive.
One book every product leader should read, and not the obvious like Inspired or something, but something else.
Well, I think this may still be in the obvious territory, but it's The Goal. Again, as an ops PM, I think that it's some really beautiful visual metaphors for what happens in any sort of, whether it's supply chain, a manufacturing, or production environment. I love that book. Theory of Constraints. That's what they say Amazon was built on.
Best career decision you almost didn't make?
Oh, McKinsey. I mean, it was such a hard decision to make because of, whether it was the travel or at that point just going for a lower comp than some of the other options on the table.
2 more questions. One thing you still struggle with as a product leader?
I think right now it is context switching because in my current role, I've never had this much breadth. So I own end-to-end supply chain technology the product role for supply chain technology across all of supply chain.
And Starbucks?
At Starbucks, yeah.
So this small little coffee shop?
This small little coffee chain with tens of thousands of stores globally.
How hard could it be? It's like get coffee and make it. It's simple, right?
It is simple in many ways and it is hard in very unimaginable ways.
Hey, everyone, if your caramel macchiato with no whip, whatever, is not made properly because the ingredients are not there, you know who to blame here. And then last question, if AI replaced half your job tomorrow, and it's already changed a lot of things, what part would you want it to take first?
Prioritization, dealing with the trade-offs, ignoring what doesn't matter, the politics. As long as if I can have AI handle that 100%.
Sekhar, first of all, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
No, thank you, Shobit. It was a privilege and it was great to talk shop.
I love how you blend different career moves, systems thinking, optionality, operations and product management, and really define what it means to be a strategic product leader in the domain you realize you love after going through many iterations. Where do people find out more about you, follow some of that writing you were talking about?
Yeah, so I write on Medium, so I can send you a link to that. But that is my home base for now. And I've gotten a second wind with generative AI again, putting out all these thoughts.
We'll be sure to put that in the show notes for everyone, whether you're on YouTube or listening on one of the podcast platforms. And to everyone listening, if you ever felt boxed into a consumer PM mold or unsure how to lead when the rules aren't written yet, this episode is your permission slip. Think bigger, and I think just as important to pick what you gravitate towards in product management. Make sure to subscribe to, if this episode resonated, share it with one other product manager who needs to hear Sekhar's story. And if you're ready to shift and get to the next level in your career, make sure you check out our website and apply for intentional job search. And I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Thank you for listening and watching. Talk to you soon. And thank you, Sekhar. Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.